Another huge political fight could be brewing on Capitol Hill. The United States hit its debt ceiling last week. The Treasury started taking extraordinary measures to pay bills. But Congress is at odds on how to avoid a default. What is Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez willing and not willing to concede? We'll ask him this morning. Plus, a first in the Texas legislature. 2 Muslims made history when they were sworn into office. But are they facing negativity because of their faith? State Representative Salman, one of the 2, is with us. Also, how did Frisco land a first-of-its-kind theme park from Universal Studios? Is the city offering tax breaks? How will taxpayers be impacted? Mayor Chaney takes our questions. And Senator John Cornyn successfully helped pass the first gun safety bill in a generation. Could he help Congress actually compromise on immigration?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Teresa Woodard in for Jason Whiteley, and this is Inside Texas Politics. We're going to begin this Sunday, as we do every week, with a look at some political headlines from across the state. We are beginning down in Houston. A lawmaker from Houston filed a bill last week to end Confederate Heroes Day as a holiday in Texas. This is celebrated January 19th. State Rep Jarvis Johnson is calling for the state to stop commemorating Confederate veterans. He calls the celebration a constant reminder of a horrible past. This is Johnson's 3rd attempt to end this holiday. Similar legislation did not make it out of committees in the past 2 legislative sessions. Now let's talk about money. We got a first look at a potential state budget over the next couple of years. Both the House and Senate say Texas should spend about $130 billion. $15 billion of that would save homeowners money on property taxes, and nearly $5 billion would be spent on Operation Lone Star. That is, of course, Governor Abbott's border security project. The surplus in Texas is so big that even after spending what was outlined last week, more than $50 billion would still be left on the table. And more money talk, this time about the debt ceiling. Yes, the United States hit it this week, about $31.4 trillion. The debt limit represents the maximum amount the federal government is allowed to borrow to pay its debt. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she will take extraordinary measures to keep the country going. But Republicans are demanding spending cuts before agreeing to raise the debt limit. And Democrats and the White House are unlikely to accept those cuts. The U.S. could face a default on its debt as soon as June. Now, raising the U.S. debt ceiling is something lawmakers do from time to time. It often causes debate, but it does frequently happen. Our first guest this morning says this time it's going to be a knife fight. We also talked with Congressman Tony Gonzalez about why he says he was recently snubbed by President Biden. Gonzalez is a Republican. His district covers 800 miles of the Texas border. It includes El Paso, San Antonio, and Uvalde.
I know predictions in politics are dangerous things, so I definitely won't ask you what your entire party is going to do about this. But what are you personally willing to do about the debt ceiling?
Yes, thank you for having me. The debt ceiling, we're a long ways off. I suspect the pinnacle of this will be June or July. But the earlier we can start the conversation, the better. It's going to be a knife fight. The debt ceiling is going to be ugly, but it's one of these things where Congress needs to sit down and really hash these things out. So it's far too early. I mean, one thing that I've made abundantly clear is defense is very important to me. So I've just put a flag in the ground that defense is important.
You were not invited to the border on President Biden's recent trip to El Paso. So 2 questions for you here. Number 1, did you ask to go on that trip? Number 2, have you asked why you were not invited?
Yes, yes, I did ask, and yes, I also asked, why I was snubbed on the trip. One thing that was frustrating is I hosted the president of the United States a little over 7 months ago when Uvalde occurred, and then I told him, look, you're the president of the United States. I'm not interested in doing anything to embarrass you. My community needs healing. We need to come together. And I did offer some advice on how that trip should go. And at that trip, I asked to meet with him, whether at the border in the White House. He called one of his aides over, agreed to it, and for 7 months, the White House essentially declined to have me have a meeting with the president. So when I got word of it, and essentially people on the ground told me, hey, this is happening, we reached out to the White House and said, hey, I'd like to be part of this visit. They came back and they said there wasn't enough room on Air Force One. What I think is comical is I never asked to get on Air Force One. I would have met the president at the tarmac. I would have met the president at any one of his stops. I simply wanted to have a policy conversation. It was very clear that the White House was more interested in having a political conversation.
You're describing a very divided climate. In a divided climate like we have with the White House and Republicans, in a divided Congress like we have, is it at all possible that we could see any sort of action on immigration, on border security?
You're right. We have a divided government. So I think there's opportunities, though, in divided government, opportunities to solve real problems. But it starts with people that are willing to have policy conversations and not rhetoric. We talked about the debt ceiling a little earlier, but honestly, I'm concerned with what we're going to see in the next week or two with this Border Safety and Security Act. And to me, this is a piece of legislation that really bans all asylum claims to include legal asylum claims. So, I know a lot of people want to have the immigration conversation. I'm focused on the border security conversation. But if one of the very first piece of legislation that we vote on is bans all asylum claims, that's a problem, because while the asylum process is broken and we need to reform it, abolishing it is a step too far.
You were the only Republican to vote against the rules package earlier when Congress began. You also said in a recent interview, I'm not a crazy extremist Republican. Does that indicate, or should it indicate to Democrats that you might be willing to compromise with them on some broader issues?
Yeah, so the rest of that quote was why the administration snubbed me in El Paso. And part of that was to highlight, if they can't work with me and others that want to have this conversation, then who are they going to work with? The reason why I voted against the rules package were a couple. One was, it's very clear that defense spending cuts were on the table. And then the second part of it too is, it was pure chaos, the speaker's vote. And that week, I did not want to see that happen every other month. And you can already see the grumblings, the debt ceiling, maybe the next thing is Congress has to get to work. We have serious issues to tackle.
You've got a lot of work ahead, as always. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you for having me.
Last January, FBI agents raided U.S. Representative Henry Cuellar's home and office in Laredo. At the time, it cast doubts on his reelection. But he won his March primary, and then in November, he defeated Republicans' efforts to flip that seat. He won a 10th term. It has now been 1 year since that raid. There have been no arrests, no charges filed. So what more do we know about the case at this point? Let's go down to Austin and ask Ian Mitra. He is the senior managing editor at the Texas Tribune. Ian, good to see you this morning. Give us the latest on this raid 1 year later.
Yeah, the latest is that we don't know much more than we did before. A year later, Representative Cuellar has basically said, he will be vindicated. The FBI hasn't released any details, nor are they expected to. So there's still just a lot of questions about what that was about, whether it was directly connected to Cuellar or something he was tangentially related to. So a year later, we're still left with a lot of questions and no timetable for when we might get any answers.
Gotcha. No answers there. All right, let's talk about Senator John Cornyn. A lot of people say he was absolutely pivotal in passing that gun safety bill, kind of the first in a generation during the last congressional session. So we're wondering, could he potentially be open to compromising and maybe push through some immigration legislation?
Yeah, and if we did, it would be the first time in probably nearly 40 years since we've had some immigration legislation passed on the federal level. Look, the senator was part of a bipartisan group of senators who went down to visit the border areas, including El Paso, Yuma, Arizona, and he expressed optimism. He feels like there's such a demand at this time for some kind of reform, and he thinks that there are things that could appease Democratic senators as well as Republicans. Some combination of support for Dreamers potentially, as well as some aspects of more border security resources. So, it's a tough uphill climb, but, the senator has expressed optimism.
Well, we'll see. We will see.
Yeah.
Ian, all right, stick around. We'll see you again in just a few minutes. Still to come this morning, 2 state representatives make history at the state capitol. Up next, Representative Salman talks about being a first. When the state legislature gavelled in to start this session, history was made in several ways. The first 2 Muslim state representatives were sworn in. They are also the first state reps of South Asian descent. Representative Salman is one of them. He is a Democrat from Euless, and he represents a portion of Tarrant County. He joined us from his new office in Austin.
Representative, good morning and congratulations to you. You've made history. Redistricting means that some of your constituents might have a little bit of whiplash going from being represented by some highly conservative members of the state house to now a Democrat. How will you make sure that you are listening to all of those constituents and representing all of them equally?
Yeah, and I'm already reaching out to a lot of Republicans, independents, and Democrats and saying that I'm here to represent everybody regardless of their political ideology. So, and I really mean that. I've already reached out to, by the way, the first constituent that I had yesterday was a Republican, and I really enjoyed meeting them. So I look forward to having more. So anybody that's out there, whether you're Republican, independent, or Democrat, please reach out to us.
As a member of the minority party, there's a good chance that some of your legislative priorities that you've walked in the door with might not happen. So how are you going to measure success during this session?
Success will mean forming relationships across the aisle, across the chamber as well, with the Senate. And that's what I'll measure success by. That's how I did in Euless City Council when I was elected as mayor pro tem by mostly Republican city council members. And I'll continue to build on relationships so that way I can work on kitchen table issues that Texans care about, every Texan cares about, basically.
I'm certain that this has not been an easy journey. It's been a magnificent one, but not an easy journey. And so there's probably things we could learn from you about rising above rhetoric that we don't like. What are some things that you have to teach the rest of us about language and things that we don't want to hear and don't like to hear?
Yeah, I'm no professor, but I have really gone through life in a way that I feel we just need to give people grace. There are a lot of people who do not know about a particular faith or particular ideology. And if we can give them grace and say, okay, I'm here to serve my people, regardless of the faith that they have or regardless of the political ideology they have, I think we'll be better served as a state. And so I always, as I've worked in the campaign, people have told me a lot of negative things and Islamophobic things about me going back to my country or that Muslims are terrorists and just really mean things. But because they may be ignorant, they may not know about the faith, they may not know that Muslims could be contributing citizens of the United States, they may have seen something on the media differently. But I try to always be positive and let them know that I'm here to serve my community, whether you're a Muslim, Christian, or Jewish, or atheist. I'm here to serve everybody regardless of where you're falling.
Great advice for the rest of us to follow. Representative, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
To hear more from Representative Bojani, you can go to our podcast, Y'all-itics. We have an in-depth discussion about his American dream and some of the difficulties his campaign encountered because of his faith. You can download the episode this morning wherever you get your podcasts. Texas is booming population-wise and development-wise, and one North Texas city just announced a huge economic win, a first of its kind Universal Studios theme park to be built for kids under 10. So how did Frisco land this deal, and how is it going to impact taxpayers? Frisco's city limits are in both Collin and Denton counties, about 30 miles north of downtown Dallas, and Frisco Mayor Jeff Chaney agreed to answer a few of our questions.
Mayor Chaney, thanks for giving us some of your time. It's good to see you this morning. So is this a done deal? Is Universal officially coming to Frisco?
There's still some steps that need to happen. So they still need to go through planning and zoning and ultimately city council approval. That is scheduled for February 2nd. We're still getting a lot of citizen input right now, doing town halls and, meeting people out in Frisco, just explaining, what the vision for this project is so they can get a good grasp of it.
Tell us how this came to be. Did the city of Frisco go looking for Universal, or did Universal come find Frisco?
We've been approached many times over the years about having some kind of theme park in our community, probably as many as a dozen, over the last 15 years. And it just never felt like a good fit, didn't fit, what we were trying to do as a city. Universal, they're certainly a bigger brand, and they were bringing a new concept. And so when people hear theme park, I think they naturally think of what you see in Orlando or maybe Six Flags. It's important for us just to tell a story. That is not what this project is. This is going to be a first of its kind, catered towards kids, under 12 years old, much smaller in scope and scale. And it's more of kind of a regional destination that, first and foremost will be great for the families here in Frisco to create lasting memories.
Are you as a city considering offering tax breaks?
Those are being negotiated certainly right now. Really, the predominant tax incentives would be around roads and infrastructure, to really try to help support the growth of that area.
Can you give us any insight into what else is being considered?
Sure. So Fields Parkway, that's being constructed right there, the infrastructure. So we're looking at potential reimbursables there. Certainly they're going to bring sales tax to the community to see how we can, potentially support them in that regard. But really the deal points, for a project like this are far lower than what we've done in some other public-private partnerships that the public may be aware of, like the PGA and the STAR.
You are in an area that is clearly seeing just explosive growth. A lot of places in Texas are, but I'm curious how you as an elected official try to balance that growth while still preserving sort of the reason that people maybe moved to a place like Frisco, peaceful neighborhoods, traffic that's maybe not out of control, though some might say I'm wrong on that already. But just tell me how you balance growth with preserving what people already have.
Yeah, one thing about Frisco is we have 35 miles of really prime commercial property. We've actually passed in 2017 the first of its kind open space ordinance, where everything coming out of the ground now 10% has to be park space. And their vision for this is to put the park back in park. It takes traffic load off our future system. And quite frankly, it takes it off peak time because it won't be rush hour traffic. And so a lot of people are concerned about universal and traffic, but when we look at our studies, really the impact is this will probably be one of the lowest traffic generators in our entire stretch of the Dallas North Tollway, and it converts traffic to off-peak times.
Wow. Well, I know it's something that a lot of families are probably going to be very excited about. So congratulations to you, Mr. Mayor, for a big announcement for the city of Frisco.
Thank you.
Mike Pence is on a tour of big evangelical churches in Texas. Does he have a chance in this state? That's one of the topics next on Roundtable. And we are back with Reporters Roundtable, where we take another look at the headlines from the week. We still have with us Ion from the Texas Tribune. Thanks for sticking around, Ion. We also have Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Good to see you as always, Bud. And Bernadine Steptoe, the political producer at WFAA TV up in Dallas. Great to see all of you this morning. So let's begin with talking about Mike Pence. He's been on this book tour. He has visited some big evangelical churches in Dallas and San Antonio. We have Donald Trump now calling him disloyal. What do you think, Ion? Does Mike Pence have a chance in the state of Texas?
Well, everything still starts and kind of ends with Donald Trump, and kind of he's going to suck up a lot of the oxygen when it comes to this. But certainly, Mike Pence has built up a lot of relationships and a lot of trust, particularly with the evangelical community. So he certainly has that respect and understanding there. But certainly, it's all going to kind of depend on how the debate goes around with former President Trump.
Yeah. Were you surprised to see Mike Pence in Texas, Bud?
I'm surprised to see him doing so well, but Pastor Jefferson in Dallas and John Hagee in San Antonio, those are big names. They usually bring winners into their churches, and they feel like that Mike Pence can be a winner in a presidential race. They're not sure Donald Trump can.
All right. Well, Bernadine, I know it's only January 2023. We're talking November 24. Never too early to do that, right? What's your take?
It's never too early, but the mere fact that they did let Pence come into those churches show that they're keeping their options open. But now, as you say, we have a long time, and there are more candidates who will be coming to the forefront. But former President Trump will be the front runner for a while.
Yeah,
because
no doubt
they're
about
looking around. Yeah.
All right, so we did see the swearing in this week of Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. So the session is off to a roaring start. We did expect to see some bills filed about gender surgery for minors, Ion, but now there are several bills that have been filed about drag shows. We're wondering, are drag shows the new bathroom bill in Texas?
Well, there's certainly going to be a big part of debate, and the thing is, I think they'll get a lot of support in the Senate. There's already bills filed in the House. I think one thing to look at is kind of where the Speaker of the House, Dave Phelan, has kind of talked about this, and he's kind of pointed more to, he's indicated more support for legislation related to elementary school lessons related to sexual orientation and gender identity. I can see some momentum going on that since he's signaled some support for that type of legislation.
All right, Bud, do you equate these two, the drag shows and the bathroom bill?
Well, I agree that there is more effort on school curriculum right now, and there are just people are dropping in all these drag show bills to be popular. They just don't have any focus, though. Are they defining drag shows as adult entertainment? Are they banning juveniles? Are they banning them totally? And we haven't heard from the Nightclub Owners Association or any of the group from that business that promotes activity of exactly what regulations that they think would be appropriate or not appropriate. They're just kind of throwing bills at the topic right now.
All right. Bernadine, your take. This is definitely sort of a conservative cause these days, it feels like.
Well, and I think that it will get a little mileage, but the state leaders have a lot of money, and they're going to be focusing more on getting some property tax release. They're going to look at infrastructure. I think you're going to see a lot more of those kinds of issues take up a lot of the time in the session now. Now, conservative Republicans will get something, but I don't think they're going to get a lot of time for those types of issues.
All right, Bernadine, Bud, Ian, great to see all of you. We appreciate it, and thank you so much for watching as well. Have a great Sunday, and we will see you back here next week.